I'm Tony, and I'm reading for Omen Kaine. It was still early. The sun was mysteriously absent from the sky, perhaps hiding shyly behind a mass of drifting clouds that looked heavily saturated with impending rain. A drab gray blue veil had been pulled across the heavens, and only subdued light crept through the ceiling-to-floor windows and filled the loft that's located somewhere down there between Bushwick and Williamsburg, Brooklyn. The one called Curious rang the phone at about 7 a.m. and inquired into the plan for the day. There wasn't one. Curious says to me, he says, "Hey man, what have you been into anyway? I haven't heard from you all week." As his nature is suggested by his nickname, he was curious as to the reason for the withdrawal. Indeed, since that January 11, 2006, for the next 7 days, no one had seen or heard a word from me. Not quite able to put a finger on it, there was a long pause on the phone. "I don't know, man. I'm feeling out of sorts. There seems to be a gloom that's pervading everywhere. Have you seen the sky this morning? The sky looks sad. The city feels wounded." Yeah, I know that sounds a bit crazy, but it feels like Gotham had something taken from her, and she's still like mourning or something. I haven't been able to function. I'm distracted. The whole scene feels somehow disrupted. On the other end of the phone, Curious listened patiently. He poured his first cup of thick Chilean coffee from the French press, lit a cigarette, and took a long drag. "So what do you think it is? Why so hung up?" he asked, even though he already had an idea of what the problem could be. How? He suffered a similar malady of the soul, as well as many New Yorkers over the last 7 days may have experienced a common anguish. "Do you think that it may have anything to do with that little girl who died last week from the abuse she'd been subject to?" Yes, and what an absolutely horrifying story that was. Her name was Nix Mary, and this beautiful little girl's tragic life of unimaginable physical and emotional suffering came to an end at 4:30 a.m., January 11, 2006, when the 7-year-old's battered body was found in her Brooklyn home of horrors. The second grader had been bound to a chair, tortured, sexually molested, and starved for weeks before being killed by a savage blow to the head. Yes, I found the story about this little girl's tragic life very disturbing, as should we all be appalled by this cruelty. I don't know. That kind of brutality, I can't even fathom. And to harm a child in this way, that's beyond anything I'd ever like to know. But I mean, really though, what do we need here, a few statistics or what? Okay, let me lay some on you then. It's an alarming fact that there is an epidemic that's only whispered about that weighs heavy on the shoulders of our country. While 3 million reports of child abuse are made every year in the United States alone, experts estimate that the actual number of incidents of child abuse and neglect are 3 times higher than reported. Child abuse occurs at every socioeconomic level, across ethnic and cultural lines, within all religions, and at all levels of education. A report of child abuse is made every 10 seconds in the United States, and 4 children die every day as a result of child abuse. 3 out of 4 of these victims are under the age of 4. Really now, who wants to think about such ugly statistics as that? Well, therein lies a huge part of the problem. If we continue to look the other way, this violent trend will only continue to grow. Curious is a sharp cat. He could probably hear the discontent in my rasped voice. "Look, I was planning to go out and shoot some photos today. I can slide through the loft. You should come with me. Get your mind focused on something else," he says to me. That might not be a bad idea. For the last 7 days, all I've done, nothing but brew, write, draw, and paint. An hour later, there were feet on concrete, footing through the back-shadowed streets of the fair city, looking upon Gotham with new eyes, and hoping to capture some of the haunting beauty, the veiled, violent neglect, and the desperate, clinging hope. Curious snapped photo after photo of Gothic side of New York. I scribbled down thoughts on page after page, an ennui quest from Brooklyn to downtown Manhattan to Washington Heights and beyond. "Oh, I hope it's cool. I called a few of the gang. They're going to meet us at the loft after we're done here," Curious says to me, stopping in front of the liquor store. "Well, maybe we should catch up to a couple bottles of red," I said, all but verbalizing Curious's exact thoughts. By the early evening, a few of Gotham's odd but creative beings wandered into the borough of Brooklyn and gathered here at this loft. As it turned out, Curious and me were not alone in our heartbreak of this lost princess named Nix Mary. I haven't been able to stop crying. Every time I see a picture of that poor little girl, I fall apart, said Sacred Sage, as she poured herself another hot cup of tea and wrote down what she had just said. Man, I'm ashamed to admit how I've been dealing with that news. I've been swinging from a bottle ever since I saw those sad eyes staring at me from the television. And I'm sure that's not the best way to handle it, but you know, Rebel said as he lit a cigarette and blew out a huge, frustrated purple cloud and then downed the rest of his glass of red wine. Just then, there was a big booming knock on the door. Curious looked out the peephole and then opened the door. Brooknom came storming in with intense energy. He said nothing, but he paced back and forth on the old worn wood floor of the loft. Then he tossed the newspaper down onto the black leather beanbag chair. Did you see the paper today? The story about this kid, man? It's getting to me to look at her. She's a beautiful child. Not for nothing, but get me some time alone in a dark room with this punk-ass stepdad who beat her. Let me introduce him to my good friends, Pain and Agony. Oh, if it were only that easy. Mid-evening, the loft had filled with so many more of Gotham's wild and creative souls, my geezers, right? They swung from the tire swing in the center of the room. Painters slapped paint on every one of the canvases I had in the place, as well as anything else that wasn't nailed down. And our filmmakers insisted on documenting every bit of footage of this madness. My beloved fellow writers fussed at me for the lack of writing paper we had available in the loft. The dancers, yes, the dancers, so uninhibited, spun round and round about the large open space. Are some of you cats actually naked? I looked to our musicians, brethren and sisters for support, if perhaps they'd lower their volume just a second while I tried to accommodate. But they only played louder and faster, sending the dancers into even more frantic Sufi circles all around me. And Curious, our photographer, instead of, maybe helping with this damn three-ring circus that was erupting here, this cat has gone into some kind of freaking shutterbug flash fiend paparazzi fit. The whole shit was going out of control, and you know what, damn it? It felt good. It felt right, you dig? May I share a theory with you? You know what I think? It certainly appears that our world, our domain such as it is, this realm is energized with forces that are polar opposites. So ultimately, by nature, these forces struggle against each other. So then, how would these forces manifest physically? I guess a very simple and evident example would be the eternal struggle between light and dark. But it's only a convenience to assume that the light is equated to good, and the dark, well, that must be likened to what is bad, right? Oh, but wait. What of that space that exists in between the light and the dark? The gray. The gray is where all things may not be as they appear. Have you heard this before? This immense battle? A war fought between the forces of good and evil. And what is the ultimate prize to be won in this intense conflict? The prize is none other than the human soul. Well then, J. Harold Christ, man, when is the battle gonna break out, right? We need to know so we can get prepared. Choose sides. I have news for you folks. That battle is happening now, and right before our very eyes. This is a war that has waged since the very beginning of time, and we are the agents and the soldiers of this war. Heaven and hell, the existence of these realms is debatable. But if we allow ourselves to believe, even in the smallest way, that these other outer worldly dimensions wait for us beyond our time here, then must we accept the beings that inhabit these realms? Angels, demons, could very well exist among us, looking as we do, speaking as we do, all the while advancing in their agenda, whatever that may be. Sure, maybe that's all just fancy and fantasy. Or maybe, just maybe, these beings are among us right now. Every time you open the newspaper or see the news on TV, do we not see many, many acts of good and evil, all carried out by us? I believe the key here is choice, free will. All of us can decide what path we'll walk. This brings us right back to the question that Sacred Sage posed. What are we going to do about it? That's why we've gathered here, yeah? To honor Gotham's fallen angels. Whatever religion, whatever cultural, political differences we may have, I think we can agree. It's not okay to harm a child. And here's what we're doing about it. Hopefully you'll leave here, you'll speak with family, friends, and the word will spread. And we'll be talking about this dilemma as a community. And then we can begin to make change. If I go on with this, we can philosophize until the end of time. So I believe I'll pass the word on to who? You folks. Thanks for coming out to listen tonight.
Thank you all for coming out.
Thanks a lot for coming out, folks.
We hope to see you again in January.
We're going to see everybody again in January. My name is Trank. This is Victor. These are the Gotham Nomads.
Thank you, guys.
And we hope that we're going to see you to support a really worthy cause. Thanks for coming out. Anybody has questions about the volunteer thing? Holla back. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Please enjoy your house. Thank you. Thank you.